Do you ever look at all you have to do and think, how am I going to get all this done? Every week I have a to-do list, and sometimes it just seems far, far too big. It's often not just the volume of the tasks. It can be that within that list of tasks, there are some that we just want to put off as they seem too great. Then, of course, they just sit there on the list, adding to our levels of anxiety and keeping us awake at night. And some tasks are just so daunting that we're not sure where we should even start or where we can turn to get help with them. There was a task a bit like that for the disciples in John chapter 6. The Lord Jesus had been healing many people who were suffering from one disease or another. The spectacle was great and huge crowds had gathered to watch. The Lord Jesus was not interested in the fame for what he did. He went up into a mountain with his closest followers, and as Jesus looked, a massive crowd was coming towards him. Jesus tested one of his disciples. It was Philip. He gave him a huge task. He asked him, where could bread be bought, enough to feed this massive, vast crowd? Philip looked at the thousands of people and made a rough estimate at the cost of bread that would be needed to feed them. Philip estimated around 200 denarii would be needed to buy the bread. Would have been roughly 8 months' wages. There was no way that Philip or the other disciples would have had anything like that amount of money with them, and there was no local villages around and certainly no bakeries that could have coped with such an order. The task that was faced was far too great. They were helpless to provide for the people. They probably gave up, or maybe all except Andrew, who struggled on to find some food. He found one young lad who had a picnic of fish and bread, and he was willing to share. This small meal might have fed 2 or 3 people, but no more. It would just scratch the surface of the problem. It certainly wouldn't solve it. It couldn't complete that task. The Lord Jesus simply got the disciples to sit the people down in 50s, in the best place that they could find. They found green grass amongst the patches of brown grass that dominated the hillside. He took loaves and fish, and he gave thanks to God, something that we should always do for the good things that we have. And then he broke them. The people were astounded as he continued to break the loaves and fish and give them to his disciples for distribution. And there was always more. Everybody ate as much as they could. Everyone was full. And there were even 12 baskets left over. What a miracle. The problem was massive, and the only person that could solve it was the Lord Jesus Christ. Our sin is the biggest problem that exists anywhere. Sin causes all sorts of problems in this world, but more importantly, it separates us from God. It stops us entering heaven. How can we solve the problem? Well, just like the disciples, we can't. But as in John 6, the only person that could solve the problem, this immense problem, is the Lord Jesus, God's perfect Son. He solved the problem in suffering on the cross for our sin, taking our punishment. The people in John 6 could have refused to eat, and if they had, they would have remained hungry. We can refuse the Lord Jesus Christ and remain in our sin, or we can accept him and turn to him, confessing our sin and believing and trusting in what he did there upon the cross.